Do you want to lead a profitable advertising strategy rather than micromanage it? Do you want to take the guesswork out of PPC or expand your advertising in other countries and languages? Then you're in the right place. At Databrill, our team of technical marketers and data scientists have poured years of experience into building the most powerful international automation tools for Amazon-sponsored ads. Our tools can handle large accounts with thousands of ad campaigns and millions of keywords across many languages. The total result is increased sales and reduced ACOS. And in contrast to most agencies, our pricing is based on an inexpensive flat rate. So get in touch today. Visit sellersessions.com/agency for more details.
Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Session. Today we bring in Corin Woodmass for the first time. Hey Corin, how you doing?
I'm great, Danny. Yourself?
Yeah, good. Do you want to give the audience a little bit of background on yourself?
Sure. So my name's Corin Woodmass. I'm the founder and managing partner here at the FBAbroker.com. And we were the first business brokerage to focus exclusively on selling Amazon FBA-related e-commerce businesses. And we launched that about 2 years ago now.
Okay, so today basically we're going to talk about is preparing your business for sale.
Okay, excellent. So here's a really good fast way to do this, and then we can go into a detailed way. So typically at this point of a conversation, I mentioned the averages. So in the marketplace as a whole, on average, across the marketplace for all businesses that are available for sale or sold, the average net profit, in fact, in a lot of FBA businesses, you'll have one product that's the majority of the income. And an investor will look at the business and see that as single product risk. Because if anything happens with that product over time, it may seem obvious that it's not when I'm talking to people, right? There's an issue with if one product goes down or there's competition that comes in, that income will decrease quite a bit. And there's a magic number for this. For it to matter for diversification, you don't really want one SKU or one product line to be over 30% of the revenue. So if you've got 40, 50, 60% from one SKU, then that will shift.
Gotcha.
So that's the main thing is your net profit is what the multiple would be based on. Let's end with a valuation range. So the baby niche is actually a pretty popular niche, and a lot of investors are interested in this niche. So I don't have the specific multiple on this one in front of me, but what we would do is we would look at our sold data and go down via category, because we actually break that down. And so to give you a rough idea of what this business could be worth based on what you've told me so far, add a multiple of between 2 and 2.5 times in this scenario. So at 300,000, double that would be 600,000. So that's probably about where you'd be selling this business, and that is what you'd be taking home, right? So we'd list obviously higher than that. So it'd be around 600,000 plus inventory at cost in this scenario.
Excellent. Okay, so let's break that out now. So there's some key things to understand here is that when most people come to you, are you finding that people think that they know their numbers but don't actually do until they get in the dirt on them? So some examples here where, you know, people in the audience, they're thinking about selling their business, but they're running everything saying spreadsheets.
The best way to do it actually is with a bookkeeper. So having a bookkeeper that also knows Amazon and understands the sale process to give you that SDE number. So typically a seller will send me financials from their taxes that they use for their taxes, right? Or they'll be using a spreadsheet or some sort of software. So the difference between all of that is you need to figure out what is the SDE number I mentioned before is referred to as seller discretionary earnings. That's what it means. And we add back expenses that you'd probably be taking out for taxes, right? So if you have a car that's not necessary for the business, you can add back that expense if you're claiming that through your business. So that's the main thing, is to figure out what is the actual expenses related to the business that are transferable to the new owner, and things that are quite common in this scenario are PPC spend. Okay, things like VAT in the UK and Europe has to be added. That's a transferable expense as long as you're making over the minimum, which is 80 grand, something like
yeah,
that.
83 or something. Yeah.
Yep. So that's number one. As well, what else does it take to run your business? So the average Amazon FBA style business has maybe a VA or two helping out. They have all their inventory going into Amazon, so there's not really too much else that they're doing. One thing that does trip people up as well, so on a high level, typically people will say, okay, my net profit is this. And when we actually do the books and we get the information back, it could be anywhere from 30 to 50% less than what they're projecting once they actually put all their figures in. Only once in 2 years, hundreds of sellers, have I seen that number be increased very significantly, and that just happened 2 days ago.
Right. Okay. So let's dip down into that then. So a lot of people are thinking this way, so there must be a common thing that they're doing wrong over and over again. What is that most common thing that they are doing wrong?
Sure. So the biggest expenses that people don't understand is cost of goods sold. So the way we do the books is via accrual accounting. And
do you want to explain that to the audience as well? Go on.
Yeah, exactly. So basically for instance, inventory. So we all buy inventory at different times of the year, and it's a lump sum. So we actually remove that from the top line P&L, that accrual basis, and we just count the inventory at cost as it's sold. So it's called cost of goods sold. So if you sell one unit, it's $10. That's $10 of expense against, say, $100 of revenue. That would be amazing, but just as an example for round figures. So that's what you need to do is you take into account for the cost of goods sold all of the landed cost to get that unit from the manufacturer to Amazon, and then you break that down per unit. So typically things like shipping, currency variations, all of these things can come into play, and that's why there's such a variance. So number one is product or inventory cost is the first thing. The second thing is people don't necessarily know how much they're spending on promotions and rebates, things like that. So people look at the top line number and what they think their gross or net margin is, and often if you're running a lot of promotions, giveaways, and you're spending a lot on PPC, that
exactly.
And all of this is actually available in Amazon reports. So in that spreadsheet I'll send you in the guideline, we actually use the Amazon reports. When you're doing this manually, pull the monthly report, the summary each month, and it gives you all of that information broken down. So they're the biggest things that trip people up. And then obviously if they have staff that they're using, or in some cases people are putting together combo packages and fulfilling that themselves. So sometimes people are actually doing a little bit of manual labor themselves, and the biggest buyer pool want everything hands off, right? Because they could be traveling, they could be in another part of the country or the world to buy your business. So it's really important that your whole business is as streamlined as possible and as hands off as possible. So we just had one recently where the seller sold 2 SKUs and everything was fine, but in the conversation we found out they were bundling an item which was a third SKU, but that was done themselves. So they had to go and figure out a third party, a 3PL service to actually do this for them, and before we could go and sell.
Yeah. So the key to this is getting on top of your numbers, using accrual accounting. So would you suggest that people use, like software packages like Seller Legend, and we have to stay on top of that because the numbers are always a moving target, and we send in products on velocity. But each time we do that, we have to update our cost of goods on that SKU. Bit of a pain in the backside, but it's far cheaper to do that than to store the stock in Amazon.
So that helps you run and manage the business.
Yeah.
So that's good from an inventory planning, cash flow scenario, but that's not exactly what you'll need when you go to sell.
Right.
So typically, our preference, if I could choose, is for everyone to use a bookkeeper and one that understands the sale process. So your numbers, essentially, you'll need to do your numbers twice. Typically, one for your taxes and one for selling the business. So how do you know what that number is along the way? So you can do that by knowing what things you can add back, typically. So personal personal business expenses, right, is one of those things. But yeah, the short answer is yes. Using some sort of software definitely gives you a leg up and can help you with that. We haven't found a software that we would recommend to do both. So to manage the business and hit print and you're good to go for selling the business, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And so give us some more insight. So the biggest length of conversation we've had so far is really the real dull, boring stuff, which is get your numbers up to date, which is for an entrepreneur is just like, we like numbers, but it's not sexy to do that kind of work. And that's why it's best to employ people to do so. But what are the key things to look out for? You know, it's like if you're wanting to sell your brand, there's people out there who are flippers. Some people want to keep their businesses. Some people want to flip. If you're going to start this from day one, what are some of the key things that you need to do? Like you set up a new brand tomorrow. You go, right, I plan to sell this in 18 months' time. What are the key things that you would do?
Sure. So that's actually a little bit tricky. I get asked this question a lot. And the first thing you really need to figure out is what products are profitable. What's your brand strategy overall? Are you going with one brand, one niche? Are you going with a brand that can kind of have multiple niches? Are you going with multiple brands, right? So if you were just thinking exclusively about selling, what you would probably want to do is have a brand that can support multiple different niches, verticals, and then figure out as fast as you can what's the profitable product lines to have, and then just roll that out and ramp it up as fast as you can. So you'd be wanting to invest. Once you figure out what works, you'd want to invest, double down on those niches and crank out as much as you can. So the first year or so, you'd be putting everything back into the business plus more to grow it as fast as you can. And then the year before you go to sell, 6 months to a year, you'd be wanting to optimize that business. So the way to do that is to that, and then have a good 12 months of growing. So you'd be mostly growing in this stage, so growing revenue before you go to sell. The downside of what you'd be doing in a tight time frame like that is you really want to optimize your net profit. What we're seeing right now is the 4 to 5 year mark. 3 to 4 year plus mark is where you can really give the product range the air to grow and breathe.
Is there any way that you can do value adds that adds value?
So let's talk about the things that make a business worth more, because that's what you're really asking, right? So valued more than another business. So a couple of things that buyers are really looking for right now, and we're seeing an increasing trend for this, is brand matters. So can your products stand up on their own? Are people searching for the product outside of Amazon? Could your product, with a few tweaks or even right now, be put into retail? That's the kind of level that investors are wanting, and that's a trend that we're seeing, and I think that will increase over time. So that's a way that a strategic investor could buy a business and put your products into their existing distribution channels. The second part that will add more value right now is unique or proprietary elements to the product. So how hard is it for someone to see this product and go source it, right? So longevity, history helps. They're the things that buyers look for, and they'll pay more for if there's more history. Because if you think about it, when you're looking at something, that the past isn't necessarily reflective of the future, but the longer something's been operating, there's a higher chance that will continue to happen in the future. Other things that really boost your multiple is things like repeat orders or any sort of subscription service that you have through your own website, because that's predictable income. And an investor recently I had a conversation with, they buy big brands and they're looking to grow massively. These guys are really interesting, so that they want a way to market to that customer again. So it's really expensive to get a customer once. It's less expensive to resell to that customer and also sell them other products. So consumables are one way to do that. And also, if you have the things that you want to focus on is what you can do with your business now to make it worth more.
And what about, it's not always straightforward to sell off of Amazon. So is there any detrimental impact on attempting to, say, do a Shopify store?
Income, similar to product diversification, income only matters from a multiple perspective. So selling a business for more, if it's above 30% and more off of Amazon, it only matters there. So in a lot of niches, you'll find it really tough to build that momentum off Amazon. It's tough. So actually, this might sound strange, but for most sellers, if your infrastructure, your team, and your strategic advantage in the marketplace is Amazon, double down on that. Only if you have specific experience or someone on the team that is wanting to learn this and run it themselves with 100% focus off Amazon, then do it. Yeah.
So, and what about the next thing? You're looking to, say, grow your business in order to sell it, but there's missteps along the way.
Yes.
How do you deal with those missteps? Because it's that uncomfortable conversation. It's like, right, year one looked really good. You had massive growth. And then year two, because you launched so many different products, you had some misses. So that took a big chunk, and then it started to pick up in year three. How does that go down with the buyers? Are they looking at it as saying, well, look, the guys have experimented here?
So it depends. So ideally, you don't want to be doing two things at the same time. So you don't want to be rapidly expanding when you have one eye on selling, because they're two different goals, right? Yeah. You only really want to be starting to plan to sell when you've figured out your product mix. And this is to get the best multiple, right? Yeah. Keep that in mind. The best possible exit is when you've figured out the product line. You may be expanding, but only in stuff you know is working. From the buy side, buyers know that for an FBA business, most buyers know that you need to expand to grow. You need to expand the product line to grow the revenue, right? So that's just how it's done. But if you're having a lot of misses, you don't really want to be selling in that year if you can help it.
And in terms of a few other things that you being optimal for, is like, do you get penalized if you do decide to try and sell in less than a year, for instance? Does that have a big impact on the business? Another example, does the amount of SKUs, does it matter if it's UK or US? Do you want to go into those three things and break them out?
Yeah. Under a year. Okay, great. Yeah. So if you go to sell under a year, to put it bluntly, we're not the people to help you do that. There's other marketplaces and other ways to do that. That's not something we get involved in. There's a couple of reasons for that. So I get that sometimes you just try some stuff and you go, okay, I've got a couple products that work, a couple that didn't, and I don't really like this FBA stuff. I'm just going to sell it. There is a market for that. A couple of things with that, you'll get a very, very low multiple. Even if your list price is a number you're happy with, maybe be happy with about half of that is the reality, what you'll see from buyers, depending on the trend of the business and what the business is. But in this case, if you're selling in under a year, chances are you just want out. And buyers know this, and they'll make an offer that matches the scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you maybe in some cases you might just get your inventory back, which to me doesn't make any sense to sell at that point, right? So the second question, this is an interesting one. So what I've seen become more interesting and something that will actually boost your multiple, it's tough to optimize for this, but what it basically is, a ratio that a buyer will look at is how much inventory are you holding at cost compared to, as a percentage, compared to your net profit number, not revenue, net profit. Okay. And we've found that the businesses typically that have a lot of SKUs are holding a lot of stock because you have to. So things like apparel, where you need a lot of sizes, color variations, if the inventory number at cost, landed cost, is above your net profit, it means something's wrong. Okay, typically you'll have dead lines, you'll have dead items that aren't selling through, and you may even have whole categories that aren't selling through. So an investor will come through, someone that knows the business will go through all of this and say, look, the 20% of your lines aren't selling, I don't want to buy it, right? So when you're going to sell, you want to optimize and make sure things are selling through. If you've got dead items, just discount it, get rid of it. Don't have it hanging around when you're going to sell, ideally. So having too much stock is a horrible time to sell. And
Okay, makes sense. And in terms of marketplaces, where
yes,
the importance of selling the US versus UK, or is it advantageous to be selling in places like Japan, India, places like that?
sure. So strictly from a sales perspective, the bulk of the market right now, just to give you an idea, is in the 100 to 500,000 list price range USD. This is so that's the bulk of the market. About 60% of the deals last year were in this range. So I'll talk about this range first, and then I'll talk about the higher ranges. So this is the bulk of the market. So at this price point, you're getting a lot of first-time investors coming into the space, looking at these businesses to buy, and they're comparing this to starting from scratch to buying something that's already working and then expanding on it. Right? And the bulk of those buyers in that pool are in the US, and they're cash buyers, right? So the bulk of those guys are looking for at least some US income. In Germany, the UK as well, Germany, Switzerland, we've got a lot of really big cash buyers that are more strategic. They're looking for larger businesses, and they are looking in UK, EU, of course, right? But the buyer pool at that lower end are predominantly US based. There are buyers for UK only businesses, but there's just less of them. So I wouldn't switch what you're doing if you're killing it in the UK and EU. Keep doing that, right? It just may take a little bit longer to find that ideal buyer.
Sounds good. Okay, so let's wrap it there. Let's give a quick top down. So we discussed you wouldn't sell the business for less than a year, for instance. That's going to work against you. Optimally, you want to be selling from the US marketplace. You want it to be defendable. So if you can add patents, recipes for like products, you might be in female grooming, for instance. You've got to give yourself 2, 3, 4 years so that you can get to the stage where you can optimize for the profit on the business in terms of net profit. So it becomes attractive to the buyer. What else is there? There's a few more things.
Yeah, so the category that you're selling in also matters. We didn't really talk about this, but so the top was home and kitchen. The second, very close second, was health and household. Bulk of that was supplements, and there's a lot of supplement businesses that have been sold. So category that you're in can dictate your multiple.
Sorry, I was going to say, you meant categories. Well, what about sexy versus functional products?
Sexy versus functional products. This is a great question. So let's talk about the sexy items first. If they're too sexy, literally adult products, there's definitely less buyer pool for those type of products. If you're just talking about this as a cool product, it's kind of, the niche is interesting and I can really get behind this product. In the lower price pool, yes, this matters. So buyers will want something that they can get excited about and pump up and really be talking to their friends about what they're doing, right? Yeah. In the higher price points, so once you get to a list price above $1 million, you're doing $500,000 a year in net profit. You might be doing 1.5, 2 million in revenue. Once you're in that price and above, you're really attracting strategic, serious buyers at that point. Much above that, if you're doing $1 million net and more, it's even more so. You're looking at private equity, family offices, very kind of more stuffy industries. So they're used to that. They love that. They're just looking at the numbers. So you can sell either when it comes to selling. At the lower price points, having a somewhat sexy product is better than having a vanilla product. However, the numbers rule.
Cool. All right. So one last question before I go. What is the impact on your account being suspended previously, even if it's one of those fake, inauthentic complaints from a bogus, seller on the platform who's just trying to knock their competition out of the way?
Yes. And another awesome question. A buyer coming in, especially an individual, so under that $500,000 where it's just their cash, right? Their biggest motivation is fear of loss. And they'll be looking for anything in the business to say, there's something dodgy here and I saved my money. They'll get as much dopamine hit in their brain as they would buying your business and having the cash flow. So that's what you're competing with. So when it comes to listing suspensions, we talk about it very upfront. We often we get sellers to document what happened, what they did about it, and how they would stop this from happening again. There are some different scenarios though.
Yeah.
If you've ever had an issue with your whole account,
Mhm.
that's a different story. Depending again what happened, right?
Yeah.
That may be bordering on unsellable, but depends on the scenario.
Yeah.
The next type of issue that we've actually had and sold a business with this issue was a whole product line. It was pretty much their most profitable product they were selling in supplements. Amazon just decided they weren't going to sell this whole category anymore for something completely unrelated to this seller. And what we did, and I was surprised he took it so well. We backed out all of the revenue and expenses for that product item because it couldn't be counted on moving forward, right? So the buyer came in, we explained what happened, how it wasn't anything to do with the seller. It was Amazon just saying, nope, we're not selling this anymore. And then that was all fine because we disclosed it. But we had to pull out all the revenue and expenses, which was tough, right? So ideally, you would have wanted to wait a bit longer to sell that business. So there's 3 scenarios that have different ways of dealing with them.
Cool. Excellent. Okay, let's wrap that there. Corin, how can people reach you?
Sure. So the best way to reach me is via our website, thefbabroker.com. And one resource that everyone in the Amazon space should check out, if I do say so myself, is the fbabusinesspriceguide.com. And what we do each month, we actually look at the whole market and we report on what's happening. And if you sign up for that report, that fbabusinesspriceguide.com is just a little opt-in, name and email. Once you sign up for that, you'll actually get a Monday Market Watch email. So we used to do this monthly. Now there's so many deals, new listings, new sales happening. We report on it each week. And even what we've started doing about 6 months ago, and is very popular, is we link to the actual new listings every single week. So you can even see what's out there. So it's great if you're a buyer, or great if you're a seller just wanting to keep a finger on the pulse, what's selling, what's not. And we report on all of that. So, and all those emails come from me, so you can just reply to any of those and you'll get through to me.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks for joining me, guys. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon, and take care.